They drew a circle, shut me out. A heretic, a rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle and took them in. Let's rise, body or spirit, sing this opening hymn. This hymn is all about how great grain and silos are, and so Lee reworked the lyrics to make it relevant for us. Let's sing out.
Sugar cane for the rose and the
So first we're going to test the mics. Can you hear this mic? Barely. Yeah, no, they're all the way up. We're in the middle of a fight with the sound system, and we may not be winning. So you can mildly hear me, correct? All right. Online people, Bobby can hear me, so we're okay. Online people, I don't know what this is doing to you. We're going to test this one. Any better? Same. And this one? All right. The good news is I don't have a lot of interesting stuff to say, so y'all are going to be okay. So we will try and project on this. Anyway, my name is Nathan. I'm one of your ministers. I'm pleased to welcome you today. Just so you know, social justice meeting will be in room 7 during middle hour. Online people, you can, if you live close, you can come up for a social justice meeting. Because of the, see, here we call these frigid temperatures. Because of the Arctic blast that we are experiencing, the cards to sign are in the fellowship hall. Starting next week is the flurry of Christmas everything. So just be aware of the Christmas everything that's happening, starting with the Christmas tree decorating party Sunday from 3 to 5. Glad you're with us. It's good to be together today.
If there's a little time left after the lecture when a professor asks if there are any questions, and there is a little silence in response to the invitation, I usually ask the most important question of all. What is the meaning of life? You never know, somebody may have the answer, and I'd really hate to miss it because I was too socially inhibited to ask. But when I ask, it's usually taken as a kind of absurdist move. People laugh and nod and gather up their stuff, and the meeting is dismissed on that ridiculous note. Once and only once, I asked that question and got a serious answer, one that is with me still. At the last session on the last morning of a 2-week seminar on Greek culture, led by intellectuals and experts in their fields who were recruited by the Professor Alexander Papadouros from across Greece. Papadouros rose from his chair at the back of the room and walked to the front. He turned and made the ritual gesture, "Are there any questions?" Quiet guilted the room. "No questions?" Papadouros swept the room with his eyes. So I asked, "Papadouros, what is the meaning of life?" The usual laughter followed and people stirred to go. Papadouros held up his hand and stilled the room and looked at me for a long time, asking with his eyes if I was serious and seeing from my eyes that I was. "I will answer your question." Taking his wallet out of his hip pocket, he fished into a leather billfold and brought out a very small round mirror, about the size of a quarter. And what he said went like this. When I was a small child during World War II, we were very poor and we lived in a remote village. One day on the road, I found the broken pieces of a mirror. A German motorcycle had been wrecked in that place. I tried to find all the pieces and put them together, but it was not possible. So I kept only the largest piece, this one, and by scratching it on a stone, I made it round. I began to play with it as a toy and became fascinated by the fact that I could reflect light into dark places where the sun would never shine, in deep holes and crevices and dark closets, It became a game for me to get light into the most inaccessible places that I could find. I kept a little mirror, and as I went about my growing up, I would take it out in idle moments and continue the challenge of the game. As I became a man, I grew to understand that this was not just a child's game, but a metaphor for what I might do with my life. I came to understand that I am not the light or the source of light, but light, truth, understanding, knowledge is there, and it will only shine in many dark places if I reflect it. I am a fragment of a mirror whose whole design and shape I do not know. Nevertheless, with what I have, I can reflect light in the darkest places of the world and change some things in some people. Perhaps others may see and do likewise. This is what I'm about. This is the meaning of my life.
So I have a theory that these speakers are not working. That's my theory. All right. Today we have 2 cards to sign. They are for 2 church members who both had falls and are recovering. Peggy Hunt and Jennifer Phelps. We are thinking of them and so much more. This ritual we have is open to everybody, visitor and member alike. For those of you online, please type your stone right into the chat. I now invite those who wish to come forward either along the west or the east wall, take a stone, place it in the chalice bowl. We now invite those to come forward who wish to place stones. And we say together, with hope to make this a better world, we light this flame. Its light is a symbol of the power of love.
We come to a time when we realize that faith we have inherited is inadequate for what we are facing. Reverend Dr. Rosemary Chinichi, a professor at Starr King School for the Ministry in Berkeley, California, calls this a religious impasse. I have learned from her that at such moments we have 3 choices. 1, we can hold to our religious beliefs and deny our experience. 2, we can hold to our experiences and walk away from our religious traditions. Or 3, we can become theologians. I'm humbled to say that that is a seminary that I went to in Berkeley, California, and Dr. Kenichi was no longer a professor when I was there, but those words read true. All of us have the capacity to be theologians, particularly in Unitarian Universalism. We're invited to study, to work hard, to not only point to the words we believe, but what does it mean for us to embody, especially in this moment in our world's history, in our families, and in our everyday.
Let's sing again. We're trying to get all the Thanksgiving hymns in we can get. So here we are, the Sunday before Thanksgiving. This is the last Sunday before Advent. And we have something we have to explore. It came up for me at Halloween, since I'm going to mix all of our holidays together into one muddled mess. See, one of my kids decided to dress up like Santa for Halloween. And so the other kid decided to dress up like the Easter Bunny for Halloween. And we were well on our way to a whole non-Halloween themed holiday party. And I got assigned Thanksgiving. So what do I dress as? Or more specifically, the question, which is the theme of today's service, is what do we do with Thanksgiving? First option is to dress up like a... Great. Oh, look. That's what I wrote down first. The simplest option, right? But not for me as a vegan. I also find this strange fascination with playing with the death of our foods, especially around Thanksgiving, a little disturbing. The pardoning of the turkey by the president, all of that kind of stuff. What's the other option? Pilgrim. Means doubling down and endorsing a myth that has led to both suffering and the suffering through the absence of acknowledging the suffering. So let me say this a little more explicitly, because this is the crux of a lot of the time of this service. We have a myth in this country about the peaceful origins of Thanksgiving. White people, and possibly all non-Indigenous Americans, have benefited from the story of how accepting the indigenous communities, the story of how the indigenous communities peacefully accepted the white settlers as the Pilgrims landed in America. There's a lot of benefit to be gained from buying into that myth. Does that make sense? All right. I muddled through that in my writing, and I try to fix it. There are other myths that come out of Manifest Destiny that have not fared as well, like myths about saving the savages and all of that. But this one persists louder and stronger than almost any other one that I can think of. And I think it persists to alleviate feelings of guilt and helplessness around what our role is and should be in our culpability about mostly, but not entirely, systemic abuses from the past. So all of this is to say, for Thanksgiving, on Halloween, I didn't want to dress up as a pilgrim. And so today, we as a religious people are going to do some exploration of what we do with a holiday that is so meaningful for so many, and yet built on a myth that is so painful for so many. I am guessing for most of you that you experience Thanksgiving Here's how it works. So I'm using this as the test run of the religious impasse reading from earlier. So you have 3 choices when you hit a religious impasse. Choice number 1 is to ignore your experience. If you have a good experience of Thanksgiving growing up, and you learn about the painful ways this myth has been used to hurt people, choice 1 is to give up on your lived experience and let go of Thanksgiving and just live it as a normal day. So choice 1 is to let go of your experience and acknowledge your belief. Option 2 is to ignore the myth of Thanksgiving and just keep eating, ignore the damage that the myth does, and just keep eating food and doing it just like this. You never learned any of the thing happened. So option 1, I'm getting muddled again. Option 1 is
stay with the rituals of your traditions and not change.
Thank you. Someone is paying attention, and it's not me, and I appreciate it. So option 1 is you ignore your lived experience and instead acknowledge your belief. Option 2 is you ignore your belief and live and accept your lived experience. Or option 3, which is the one we're going to explore today, is to become theologians. So what we're going to do for the offering is we're sharing it this month with the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee. I had mentioned before that this organization does great work doing justice work with communities that are in need. And last week, a member of this church pointed out to me that the UUSC is currently working with an organization on the coast of Louisiana. It's the Lowlanders, or is that what it is? Has anyone heard of this organization? Well, the church member sent me a bunch of information that I couldn't fit into today's service. But the organization that we've been promoting all month about being good at caring for and working with communities, well, they're doing it right here in Louisiana too. I mean, they do it all over the world, and they've also picked to help Louisiana. So I will ask us, we're going to split the offering right down the middle. Ask us to give very generously as this morning's offering is gratefully given and received.
Who is freedom for? Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter. Paraphrased from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We gather at Thanksgiving in some sense to retell the creation myth of our country. In this myth is our very best and our very worst. A boldness, a care for the common good, a wish to say we before I. Yet, from even before the first Thanksgiving feast, it's a story of theft and violence and a ruthlessly narrow definition of who we really means. The colonialists had come seeking freedom, and in that we identify with them. But it was freedom only for themselves. In every generation forward, from that day to this, the people living in this land that became America struggled always with the question, who is freedom for? Black persons were taken from their native Africa to become slaves. Immigration laws were written explicitly to prohibit non-Western Europeans. Women could not vote even a century ago. In many states right now, including Baton Rouge, gays and lesbians can legally be fired or evicted merely for not being straight. Refugees knock, and in responses, voices call to bar the door. The Universalist minister Clarence Thomas, Lord have mercy, help us. I was reading well, wasn't I? I've had my second sort of slip in from this pulpit. We'll not go back to that June service when I said the names wrong. Clarence Skinner, can we say Clarence Skinner? Wrote a century ago, "The fight for freedom is never won. Each generation must win for itself the right to emancipate itself from its own tyrannies, which are ever unprecedented. Therefore, those who have been reared in freedom bear a tremendous responsibility to the world to win an even larger and more important liberty. So may it be for us. We are the inheritors of our liberty, won with sweat and labor and blood of generations before us. May we be a people committed to winning ever larger liberty for the generations that follow. Who is freedom for? May we answer today and always, every one of us."
So let us start this section off with a naming. This church sits on land that we purchased in the 1960s. It was part of one of many forced labor camps in America. This land used to be called the Cortana Plantation or the Little Misery Plantation, which is not our term. That was on the bill of sale we found in the 1850s. Before that, this land belonged to the Bayagula and Homa people. The Homa people, by the way, are still not recognized as a federally, nationally recognized tribe, probably, but definitely not because of the oil land that their land would sit on. Every year at our General Assembly, hundreds of delegates from thousands of congregations gather together to vote on various things. These are policy statements, actions of immediate witness, bylaw changes, moral and ethical statements. It's a deep, deep, deep dive into Robert's Rules of Order that has never interested me. So I tend to avoid a lot of the discussions. So I am coming to you as your most ignorant minister here. You go to the stuff?
I do.
You do? Kathy, you go to the stuff, right? Yeah. So here I am preaching on the things that I intentionally avoid. But a few years ago, there was a substantial debate about what we should do with the 400th anniversary of Thanksgiving. When the debate started, my ears perked up just a little. You see, my people are all from Louisiana. Until my parents, they were all Catholic. We intersected with Thanksgiving much later than many of our Unitarian Universalist religious siblings who come out of New England. Now, you have to know a little about our history to understand what I mean. So Unitarianism and Universalism both come out of white New England. Everything you read about those Puritans and the Calvinists who started up churches in New England, those are our ancestors religiously. As the British conquered and settled in what is now Massachusetts, as they fought with the people who lived there, as they began to set up their own towns, they started churches. They had a church in every town, and these churches were called like the First Parish Church of Concord or Lexington or Quincy or Boston. Because the Puritans were Congregationalists, just like we are now and just like the Baptists. And unlike the Catholics with a pope and cardinals and bishops, and unlike the Methodists with districts and regions and things that I also don't understand, the congregation decides its own theology. It decides its own clergy. It decides its own budget, and it owns its own building. Over the generations, many of the theologies in many of these Congregationalist, but not all, of these Congregationalist churches moved and evolved. And many of these churches began to embrace Unitarian and later Unitarian Universalist theologies. There are a few myths in our country that have done substantial damage, and many of them have origins within white New England Unitarian churches. That means we have an extra imperative to be theologians in this area. That means a General Assembly during the grand 400th anniversary debate. While I didn't have a cultural and geographic investment, I did have a religious heritage investment. So here is what they passed. They said, whereas the year 2020 marks the 400th anniversary of the arrival of the ship Mayflower in the region now known as New England, and whereas concern has been expressed by Native American tribal leaders, by human rights advocates, by environmental justice advocates, and by others about the celebration of the 400th anniversary of the colonization of New England, and whereas several of the New England congregations that were established during the 1600s continue today as Unitarian Universalist congregations, and noting the role of Unitarian Universalists in developing the holiday now known as the American Thanksgiving Day, therefore be it resolved that this General Assembly encourages all Unitarian Universalists to enter into a time of education, careful reflection, and healing during the years 2016 to 2021. Did you all do that? Because we're done. We don't have to do it now. Anyway, I'm going to let my cynicism die out for a second. And that special attention be given to the suffering, indignity, and loss that Native peoples have suffered since the early 1600s. Now, there's actually a lot of internal controversy about this, partially because this was pushed with, I believe, no Native American input, but I could be wrong because I don't follow plenary well. But I want you to know that's sort of the conversation that your fellow religious people have been having for at least 5 years, if not 400. So we have to explore what it means that we perpetuate an idea that we are somehow entitled to the lands that we have at the expense of others. We have to explore other myths in our larger culture that are keeping us from getting to the land we all deserve. I'm not just talking about socio-political myths that set our culture. I'm also talking about what myths play out in your family. What myths about who you are and who you are allowed to be, and how those myths are still keeping you from being the person that you were born to be. What are the ways that this church helps you access who you are? And what does this church need to do differently? What myths does this church need to remove for you to be able to do the deeper work to know yourself better? What were you taught growing up about your body, about your race, about your gender or genders, or who you are or are not allowed to be attracted to? What were you taught about the quality of your soul? How much do these myths still keep you from doing what you need to do? Because in a few days, many of us will break bread together, I thought this could be a part of the service for us to do a little bit of a more deeper reflection internally. The hymn we are about to sing traditionally is used as a communion hymn. We use it every year at our Tenebrae service, but we don't use it many other times. It's a hymn that comes out of enslavement, another sin of this country with origins in white New England Unitarian myths about who is and is not worthy, and who does and does not deserve freedom and human autonomy. But that is a sermon for a different day. This is a hymn that does not promise anything is right today, but it is a promise of hope. When we break bread, because remember, the earliest communion meals were simply meals of people who normally don't eat together. And actually, Paul had to go in and try and correct these because some of the rich people would find all these tricks to keep the poor people from getting there for the meals in time. Early communion was a time when people ate together. So, when we break bread together, the hymn says to break bread together on our knees. And that part has always made me cringe because of the subservience implied in it, because of the oppressive nature of biblical interpretation that tells people to be subservient to those in power, to those who would tell you were supposed to engage with prayer or with God or with communion, those who would tell you the communion table is not for you because of who you are. So I've always been resistant to that first part. But knowing the origins of the hymn and reading interpretations of the hymn, I don't hear it that way anymore. When we eat together, let us be humble. Let us acknowledge our brokenness. Let us stop pretending, especially Unitarian Universalists, that we have all the answers and we have it all together. Let us be broken together. Let us acknowledge the temporary state that is our living. That is how we can acknowledge the gift of eating together, the gift of being alive together. Let us acknowledge that for us to eat, others have to work, and sometimes things have to die. Let us acknowledge that life is hard and that it is okay to struggle. But that is just the first line in the hymn. The second line is with our face to the rising sun, looking east. It is a promise that no matter how broken, no matter what the world throws at you, we eat together facing the future. We are together hoping for a better world. So right where you're seated, let's sing this next hymn.
Together on our
Would you join me in a moment of prayer and reflection? The God that we know when we see love and kindness and justice and hope, be with us on this day. And hold all those who are grieving today. All those who are missing. All those who long for justice and for reconciliation. Hold all who have been left behind in the myths of this country. Help us to understand that mercy is not reserving of violence, but mercy is a promise that all of us are held in love, no matter how many times we mess up. Help us to stay loving in this world. For those for whom these next few weeks will be hard, may you have the strength to make it through. May we be a grateful people. May we make the world a better place. Amen. I know that discussions of race are starting to fall into these partisan buckets. I know that there's a manufactured hysteria about critical race theory. And I know that white people are using criticisms of it to avoid feeling uncomfortable about acknowledging some of the harsh realities that our country has to offer. I think we mix up guilt and responsibility too much. When I bought my house in 2016, the inspector pointed to a set of stairs that led up to an old carport. My neighbor had sold off the carport, which I didn't know you could do, but I inherited the stairs. And he said these stairs are probably going to hold water as it drips off the roof line. So first priority when we got our house is we fixed all the things that would cause it to burn down. Then about 6 months to a year later, I decided it was time to work on those stairs. So we demolished the stairs, and the thing that the inspector had warned us about was true. The stairs that held water allowed it to slowly drip in. I don't know what holds up pier and beam houses. It's like a sill or a... Where's our construction people? Wood. It broke down the wood. So the corner of my house that was held up by wood was no longer there. So basically, a corner of my house was just floating with nothing to protect it. And I couldn't find someone to fix it for a long time also. Eventually, I reached out to a guy who wouldn't do it, but he knew a guy who knew a guy who doesn't do that, but he really likes ventilation under houses, so I could convince him that I wanted ventilation work. He would fix the wood. That guy did. And actually, my house is sort of built into a hill, and so the guy had to shave the wood to get out. It was a very complicated situation. All of this is to say, the state of race in our country is not our fault. And in some small amount of it, it might be, but the larger institutions that we have all inherited are not ours. Lauren and I decided to buy this house, so the metaphor falls apart a little bit, because none of us chose to be born, but all of us have been given this house that we are in now. And the question is, what are we going to do with it? It is not our fault that the corner of the house was broken. It is the fault of many, many former homeowners who did not take care of it. But if we want to have a stable house, and if we want to have any chance at ever selling that house or living a happy life where a corner of the house doesn't fall into the ground, it's something that we have to fix. Guilt and shame over that corner of the house, which surprisingly I felt plenty of, is not helpful. We have inherited a country founded on stolen land, built on stolen labor. We have inherited a country that purports individual absolution at the expense of universal salvation. This country has always prioritized the aristocracy, whether that is an aristocracy of wealth or education or demographics. And it discourages us from working together for universal salvation. Once again, our choice is not just what to do with Thanksgiving, but it is with every religious impasse that we face. Do we choose to give up on our experience, in this case enjoying the time together with family under a very specific and prescribed meal, and instead embrace a belief which is that myth that Thanksgiving is the myth of Thanksgiving that is still causing harm to people? Do we give up on our knowledge about the myth and just double down on the holiday and continue to do that harm? Or do we become theologians? Do we live in the gritty, beautiful, complicated, awkward middle ground where there is not necessarily always a right answer? There is only a good enough answer that we keep wrestling with.
We have been plagued by a tiny yet powerful virus that has ravaged our world, disrupted our daily existence, and taken too many lives. We have been distressed by economic uncertainty, and many of us continue to struggle financially. We have been racked by political divisiveness that has torn apart families and friendships. We have been troubled by racial injustice and prejudice that continues to divide us at a time when we need one another more than ever. We are tired, and still we are grateful. Grateful for the earth that produces the food we eat, grateful for the hands that grow it, tend it, deliver it, and prepare it. Grateful for warmth of the sun and shelter from the cold. Grateful for those who work to heal our sickness. Grateful for family and friends, even though we may find ourselves apart this Thanksgiving. Grateful for one another and the opportunity to begin again in love, to address our differences and mend our relationships. Grateful for the gift of life itself. We are grateful.
So I don't love Thanksgiving. I never have. I don't enjoy most of the food, and this is not because of me as a vegan, because I found a way to veganize all the food. I don't like most of the food because it's textured like goo. That's right. I'm calling you out, dressing, and mashed potatoes, and overcooked peas, and gravy, and rice, and most of the pies. I don't like Thanksgiving because of the disproportionate attention to the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, relative to how terrible a parade it is. As a parade goer who knows what a good parade is, it's fine for it to get some attention, but it is not worth the amount of attention it gets. Are we all in agreement on that?
Yes.
Thank you. I don't love Thanksgiving because as a kid, it felt like Christmas, but without the gifts, without the pomp and circumstance, and without the decorations. And I don't like Thanksgiving because it is complicated for me. I don't know what to do about my impasse, about the realities that I am unable or unwilling to rectify as it relates to my relationship with indigenous peoples and the myth of this holiday. And even though I dislike this holiday, I don't dislike it, it's just not in my top 7, I guess. We'll go 5, not in my top 5. And yet last year, through nothing spectacular in any way about the holiday, we still watched the thing. We still enjoyed the goo. It was one of the best memories that I've had. We got together with extended family in Houston. It was cold. We stayed in a very sketchy Airbnb. But why did I love it? It was the first Thanksgiving after we had the vaccines. It was the first major holiday I could gather with family and not worry about dying or killing someone because of my breath. I know we want to move past this thing, and I know that we've been living with it for too long, but we cannot discount the power of gathering together last year. And also, gathering together last year helped bring about the Omicron surge, which shut this church down. So we need to acknowledge that too. The role of this church is to hold a mirror up to everything. We must be a church that sees the world as it actually is, not the source of light, but the redirector of light. We have this lantern here today because we were hoping to have a Transgender Day of Remembrance service earlier this week. Is tomorrow the recognition, or is it today? It's actually today. We reached out to some of the local trans leaders, and we were not able to build the relationships quickly enough to have a service this year that felt accountable to them from ours, the minister's vantage point. This is mostly a pandemic-related disconnect. It used to be we had PFLAG, the Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays. That was the term PFLAG. They used to meet here and do the service, and we did it in conjunction with them. So it was an intentional decision not to do it this year, not because it isn't worth acknowledging, but because it is important enough that we acknowledge it well with the buy-in of the people for whom this service is primarily for. But, period. There is power in acknowledging, shining the mirror on the real struggles, the real violence, the real risk that trans people go through just to be who they are. And so this church's role is to hold a mirror up to everything, not to pretend that things are the way that they've always been. It's not to shame or to blame or to seek out our individual absolution at the expense of universal salvation, not to ideologically distance ourselves from our families anymore. There is no theological tie-in to that first part about the Halloween costume, except I found a drawing of a turkey that was made into like a full body suit, like the one you do with your hands with the little fingers. Anyway, that's what I dressed as, because I know I'm going to get 1,000 questions of that. But all of this is to say, if we're not going to make the false choice of letting go of our experience or letting go of our religious upbringing, our experience or our new knowledge, and we have to become theologians, I would encourage us to do as the old Universalists did. To look at that promise that is embedded in my heart. That promise is to rest assured. It is a promise that all of us came out of goodness, and we will all return to goodness. It is a promise that we are held by something loving and beautiful, and that all of us are worthy. The question is not about what we should do with Thanksgiving. The question is, what will we do to ensure our generation and the next has a liberty larger than ours, a freedom larger than ours? Do the theological work at this religious impasse. Find a way to be together with people, to do less harm, to love the hell out of your people, and to not perpetuate any myths that hurt you or others. And because we always skip over the you, do the theological work you have to do to not perpetuate the myths that are hurting you. Because your people are my people. We are helplessly interconnected, and there is nothing we can do to change that. Our attempts to change that reality will only cause more harm. So I invite you to go into this week knowing that you are held in love, knowing that you have radical abilities to heal divides, that we can be humble and broken and still look towards a dawning future more. Amen. Let's sing. And let's sing out, because we're not doing this hymn again because Christmas is coming. So, sing it out real good.
Where you go, I will go, loving the world more. Go make the world better because you exist. Amen. Go in peace.